When a solar flare killed all radios at 40,000 feet, the U.S. Air Force's billion-dollar satellites couldn't guide the plane home. 2 pilots were lost. 198 passengers faced death in the Atlantic. Then a silent 11-year-old autistic girl opened her notebook, and navigated using stars and math, doing what the entire Air Force couldn't do. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Kira Osei sat perfectly still in seat 22A. She was 11 years old. Very small for her age. Only 4 feet 5 inches tall. Thin body. Dark brown skin. Her hair was braided tightly into 2 small puffs on each side of her head. She wore bright yellow headphones. Big ones that covered her whole ears. A purple hoodie that was way too big for her. And she held a thick notebook against her chest like it was protecting her. Her eyes never looked at anyone. Not the flight attendant. Not the other passengers. Just down at her notebook or out the window. British Airways Flight 117. London Heathrow to New York JFK. Boeing 777-300ER. 298 people on board. Passengers and crew. The flight attendant came by with drinks. She smiled at Kira. "Would you like some juice, sweetie?" Kira didn't speak. She lifted her notebook. On the page, she had already written in perfect handwriting, "Water please. No ice. Thank you." The flight attendant's smile changed. Became softer. A little sad. "Oh honey, you don't have to write everything. You can just tell me what you want." Kira shook her head. She pointed to a card hanging around her neck on a string. The flight attendant leaned closer to read it. "My name is Kira. I am autistic and nonverbal. I communicate through writing and gestures. Please be patient." "Thank you." The flight attendant nodded slowly. "Of course, sweetheart. 1 water, no ice, coming right up." The businessman sitting in seat 22B glanced at Kira. Then he looked away quickly. He seemed uncomfortable. He probably hoped this autistic girl wouldn't cause any problems during the long flight. The elderly woman in seat 22C smiled warmly at Kira. But she didn't try to talk to her. She respected what the card said. To everyone on this plane, Kira was just another special needs child. Traveling alone. The unaccompanied minor with the bright yellow headphones. The girl who sat very still and stared at her notebook. Who wrote and drew with her pencil. Very careful. Very precise. Nobody knew what was in that notebook. Nobody knew that Kira Osei had a photographic memory so powerful she could remember every page of every book she had ever seen. Every single word. Every picture. Every number. Nobody knew she had memorized 73 aviation navigation charts. 12 complete flight manuals. 4,000 pages about weather patterns. Every star chart you could see from the northern hemisphere. Nobody knew she could do complex math in her head. Trigonometry. Spherical geometry. Celestial navigation. Faster than most pilots could type into a computer. And absolutely nobody knew that in a few hours, she would save all 198 lives on this plane. Using skills that modern aviation had forgotten 60 years ago. 2 years ago, Kira's father died in a plane crash. His name was Captain Marcus Osei. He was a commercial airline pilot. British Airways. He had been flying for 22 years. He was very experienced. Very good at his job. He was flying a normal transatlantic route. London to Boston. Just another workday. Then something went terribly wrong. A mechanical failure. Something catastrophic. The aircraft crashed into the ocean. All 284 people on board died. Every single person. Kira was 9 years old when it happened. Her autism made grief different for her. She couldn't cry at the funeral. Everyone else was crying. But Kira just stood there. Dry eyes. Blank face. She couldn't say how she felt in words. Couldn't explain the emptiness inside. Couldn't process the idea of gone forever, the way other children do. Instead, something else happened. Something her mother didn't expect. Kira became obsessed. She wanted to understand exactly what happened. She needed to know why the plane crashed. She wanted to memorize every detail. Every fact. Every number. So she could prevent it from happening again. So she could understand. Her mother was Dr. Amara Osei. A research scientist at Cambridge University. Very smart. Very caring. She tried everything to help Kira. Therapy. Grief counseling. Different medications. Support groups. Nothing worked. Kira didn't want to talk about her feelings. She didn't want to draw pictures of happy memories. She didn't want to process her father's death. She wanted to understand aviation. What finally helped was unexpected. Marcus Osei had kept a home office. A small room filled with aviation books. Flight manuals. Navigation guides. Studies about weather patterns. Textbooks about aerodynamics. Historical records from old aviation. Celestial navigation charts from before GPS existed. He had collected these books over his whole career. Some were very old. From the 1940s and 1950s. From when pilots had to navigate by looking at the stars. After the funeral, Kira started spending hours in that room. Just sitting. Reading. Memorizing. Her mother thought it was a comfort thing. That Kira felt close to her father there. Which was true. But it was more than that. Kira's brain was absorbing everything. Her eidetic memory, her photographic memory, worked like a camera. She would read a page once. Look at it for maybe 30 seconds. And it was stored in her brain forever. Every word. Every diagram. Every number. She memorized. The exact coordinates of every major airport in the world. The latitude and longitude numbers. Wind patterns across the Atlantic Ocean at different heights. How the wind changes at 10,000 feet versus 40,000 feet. Star positions for celestial navigation. Where every star should be at every time of year. How to use them to find your location. Ocean current drift calculations. How the ocean pushes planes off course. How to correct for it. Dead reckoning techniques from World War II. How ferry pilots crossed the Atlantic without any electronic equipment. Just compasses and math. Magnetic variation charts. How magnetic north is different from true north. How it changes depending on where you are. Fuel consumption rates for different aircraft types. How much fuel a Boeing 777 uses per hour. How to calculate if you have enough to reach your destination. She didn't just memorize the words. She understood what they meant. Her autistic brain was very good at seeing patterns. Mathematical relationships. Cause and effect. Things that most people need years of training to understand. By age 10, Kira could look at any flight route and calculate in her head how much fuel the plane would need. What altitude would be most efficient based on wind patterns. Backup landing sites if something went wrong. Emergency diversion routes. Estimated time of arrival. Down to the minute. But she couldn't tie her own shoes without help. She couldn't make eye contact with people. She couldn't speak in complete sentences when she felt stressed. Her mother didn't know about the navigation obsession. Not really. She thought Kira was just reading her father's books as a way to remember him. Which was partly true. This trip to New York was to visit Kira's aunt. Her mother's sister. One of the few people Kira felt comfortable around. Aunt Sarah was patient. She understood how Kira's brain worked. She never forced Kira to talk or make eye contact. Kira had prepared carefully for this flight. She had her notebook. It contained hand-drawn copies of dozens of navigation charts. Perfect copies. Every line exact. Every number correct. She had her headphones to block out overwhelming sounds. The engine noise. People talking. Babies crying. All the sounds that felt like knives in her brain. She had her routine. Seat 22A. Always a window seat. So she could see the stars. See the ocean. Calculate the plane's position based on what she saw. She was prepared for a quiet, predictable flight. The universe had different plans. 68 minutes into the flight. The plane was at 40,000 feet. 7.5 miles above the Atlantic Ocean. 1,847 miles from land in any direction. Kira was watching the ocean through the window. Watching the waves. The way the sunlight reflected off the water. She was mentally calculating the aircraft's speed based on the angle of the sun. Based on the wave patterns below. Then something impossible happened. The cabin lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then they went steady again. Then every electronic screen in the aircraft went completely black. The seatback entertainment screens. The overhead displays showing the flight map. The reading lights. Everything. Not dim. Not glitching. Just dead. Completely off. Passengers gasped. Someone said, "What the hell?" A child started crying somewhere behind Kira. The pilot's voice came over the speakers. But it sounded wrong. Strained. Confused. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our systems. Please remain calm and stay in your seats. We'll have more information for you shortly." The speakers clicked off. But Kira knew better than the pilot. She had read about solar flares. Massive explosions on the sun. They send out electromagnetic pulses. Waves of energy that can destroy electronics. She had read about the Carrington event. A massive solar storm in 1859. It destroyed telegraph systems all over the world. If it happened today, it would destroy everything electronic. Everything. Kira opened her notebook. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her writing was still perfect. She wrote rapidly. Solar flare equals all radio dead. No GPS, no autopilot. Manual navigation only. Pilots won't know how. Need celestial navigation plus dead reckoning. She stared at what she had written. Then she looked out the window. She checked the sun's position. Calculated their approximate heading based on the angle. She checked her mental database of Atlantic weather patterns at this time of year. Did the math in her head. And she realized something terrible. If the pilots tried to navigate using just their basic instruments, without radio guidance, they would drift off course. They wouldn't know they were drifting. They would run out of fuel before reaching land. All 198 people would die. The plane would crash into the ocean. Just like her father's plane. But Kira could navigate. She knew the stars. She knew the ocean currents. She knew the wind patterns. She could guide them to New York using the same techniques pilots used in 1940. Before GPS. Before computers. There was just one problem. She was 11 years old. Nonverbal. Autistic. And nobody was going to believe her. Captain Sarah Whitmore stared at her instrument panel in disbelief. She was 48 years old. She had 19,000 flight hours. She had flown through storms, mechanical failures, medical emergencies. She was experienced. Calm under pressure. But she had never seen this. Every digital display was black. Dead. Not working. The radio made only static noise. The GPS showed nothing. The autopilot had disconnected. Sitting next to her, First Officer James Park looked equally shocked. He was 34. 6,500 flight hours. Young but competent. Sarah pressed the radio button. Tried to call air traffic control in London. London Centre, British Airways 117, do you copy? Nothing but static. She tried New York. New York Centre, British Airways 117, radio check. Still nothing. James pulled out the emergency backup radio. A separate system. Independent. Designed to survive anything. He tried it. Also dead. Sarah, he said quietly. His voice was tight. This isn't just our aircraft. This is everything. Something took out all electromagnetic systems at the same time. Sarah's hands gripped the control yoke. She was hand-flying now. Manually controlling this massive Boeing 777. 247 tons of aircraft. All on her. What about other aircraft, she asked. James looked out the window. Scanned the sky. I don't see any contrails. No other planes visible. If this hit us, it hit everyone in the sky. The entire North Atlantic airspace is flying blind right now. Sarah took a slow breath. Forced herself to stay calm. Okay. We still have basic instruments. The mechanical backups. Compass. Altimeter. Airspeed indicator. The old-fashioned stuff that doesn't need electronics. We can navigate the old way. You mean dead reckoning? James shook his head. Sarah, I barely remember how to do that. We've been using GPS for 20 years. I haven't done manual navigation since flight school. Then we figure it out. Sarah tried to remember her last known position. We were at approximately 51 degrees north latitude, 28 degrees west longitude. Heading 270. Ground speed 520 knots accounting for the jet stream. James pulled out paper charts from the emergency equipment locker. The old kind. Rarely used anymore. He spread one across his lap. Okay, if we maintain this heading and this speed, we should reach. He trailed off. Stared at the chart. Wait. These charts don't account for wind drift. Or magnetic variation. Or how ocean currents affect our drift calculation. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. How far off could we be? James did some quick mental math. His face went pale. Without radio navigation beacons. Without GPS corrections. Sarah, we could drift 200 miles off course and not know it until we run out of fuel searching for land. Sarah pressed the PA button. Kept her voice very calm. Very professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a temporary communications issue due to unusual solar activity. We're navigating manually and expect to reach New York on schedule. Please remain calm. She released the button. Then she whispered to James, we need help. We need someone who actually knows old-school navigation. Because I sure as hell don't know it well enough. Kira had been listening through the cockpit door. Her hearing was hypersensitive. Part of her autism. She could hear things other people couldn't. The stressed tone in the pilots' voices. The fear they were hiding. She wrote in her notebook. They don't know celestial navigation. They will drift south. Current heading plus jet stream plus magnetic variation equals 47 miles off course per hour. 3.5 hours to NYC equals 164 miles south. They will miss runway. Fuel will run out over ocean. She calculated in her head. Current fuel, approximately 52,000 kilograms based on typical departure weight for this route. Fuel consumption rate, 7,200 kilograms per hour. Flight time remaining at current speed, 7.2 hours. Drift rate without correction, 47 miles per hour south. Final position if uncorrected, 338 miles south of JFK Airport. Outcome, ditching in the Atlantic Ocean. Zero survival rate in February. Water temperatures. 198 people would die. 198 people would die unless someone corrected the navigation. And Kira knew she could correct it. She had the charts memorized. All of them. She could calculate the exact heading adjustments needed. She could guide them to New York safely. But how does an 11-year-old nonverbal autistic girl convince two adult pilots to listen to her? She stared at her notebook. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly. From the overwhelming sensory input. The stress. The noise of people around her getting worried. She took a deep breath. The way her therapist had taught her. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt. Stood up. The businessman in 22B looked alarmed. Hey kid, you need to sit down. The seatbelt sign is on. Kira ignored him. Started walking toward the front of the plane. Toward the cockpit. Her notebook clutched against her chest. A flight attendant stepped in front of her. Her name was Rachel. Mid-40s. Kind eyes. She had been nice to Kira earlier. Sweetheart, you need to stay in your seat right now, okay? The pilot said. Kira held up her notebook. She had already written on a new page. I can navigate. I know celestial navigation. The pilots are drifting off course. I can fix it. Please let me help. My father was a pilot. I memorized everything. Rachel read it. Her expression softened. She looked at Kira with pity. Oh honey, I know you're scared. But the pilots know what they're doing. They have training. Kira frantically flipped pages in her notebook. Showed Rachel the hand-drawn navigation charts. Perfect replicas of official aviation charts. Every detail precise. Latitude and longitude lines. Magnetic variation numbers. Waypoint coordinates. Ocean boundaries. Alternate routes. All drawn by hand. All from memory. Rachel's eyes went wide. Did you draw all of these? Kira nodded. Wrote quickly. From memory. I have photographic memory. I have memorized 73 navigation charts. I can calculate heading corrections. Please. 198 people will die if I don't help. Rachel stared at this tiny girl. Yellow headphones. Purple hoodie too big for her body. Not making eye contact. Hands shaking slightly. This impossible notebook. Rachel made a decision. Come with me. Rachel knocked on the cockpit door. A special pattern. The crew recognition code. Sarah's voice came through. Tense. What is it? Captain, there's a passenger who says she can help with navigation. A pause. Tell them thank you for the offer, but we're handling it. Captain. Rachel's voice was firm. She's 11 years old. And she has hand-drawn aviation charts that look professional. I really think you should see this. Silence for a few seconds. Then the lock clicked. The door opened. Sarah Whitmore looked out. Saw Kira standing there. Small. Headphones on. Not making eye contact. Clutching a notebook like a life preserver. This is who wants to help navigate. Sarah's voice wasn't mean. Just confused. Rachel nodded. Her name is Kira. She's autistic and nonverbal. But Captain, you need to look at her notebook. Kira held it up. Open to a page showing a perfect reproduction of North Atlantic Track Chart NATA. The chart included waypoint coordinates. Every single number correct. Magnetic variation corrections for this latitude. Oceanic boundaries. Alternate routes if weather was bad. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Where did you get this chart? Kira wrote rapidly on a new page. Drew from memory. My father was Captain Marcus Osei. Died in crash 2 years ago. I memorized all his aviation books. I know celestial navigation. I can guide you to NYC using stars plus sun position plus dead reckoning. You are currently drifting 47 miles per hour south due to jet stream plus magnetic variation you're not accounting for. James read over Sarah's shoulder. 47 miles per hour drift? How could she possibly know? Kira flipped to another page. Complex mathematical calculations. All written in perfect handwriting. Current heading, 270 degrees true. Magnetic variation at this position, 22 degrees west. Jetstream component, 87 knots from 310 degrees. Coriolis effect at this latitude, 0.3 degrees drift per hour. Combined drift calculation, 47.2 miles per hour south. Correction needed, heading 276 degrees true to compensate. Sarah stared at the math. She had studied navigation. But this was advanced. This was stuff she would need a computer to verify. And an 11-year-old girl had done it in her head. James, is this math correct? James pulled out his own navigation calculator. Started checking the numbers against his paper charts. His face went pale. I think it's right. The magnetic variation is correct. The jet stream numbers match what we were briefed. The drift calculation. He shook his head in disbelief. Sarah, this is graduate-level navigation mathematics. Done by an 11-year-old child. Sarah looked at Kira carefully. Really looked at her. This girl wasn't making eye contact. Her hands trembled slightly. She was clearly uncomfortable with all this social interaction. But her notebook showed genius-level understanding of aviation navigation. Can you really guide us to New York? Sarah asked gently. Kira nodded. Wrote. Yes. But I need to see stars through cockpit window. Need to track sun position every 30 minutes. Need to calculate continuously. I will write all heading corrections. You fly the plane. I navigate. We save 198 people together. Sarah and James looked at each other. This was insane. They were trained commercial pilots. She was an 11-year-old child. But their instruments were dead. Their radios were silent. And this girl had just calculated drift rate faster and more accurately than their emergency equipment. Sarah made the call. Okay, Kira. You can help. But you sit in the observer seat. You don't touch any controls. You give us numbers. We verify them if we can. Then we follow them. Agreed? Kira nodded firmly. Sarah opened the cockpit door wider. Come in. Kira stepped into the cockpit. Her first time ever in a real cockpit. She looked around at all the instruments. The controls. The windows. She climbed into the jump seat behind the pilots. The observer seat. Opened her notebook to a fresh page. And began calculating their survival. For the next 4 hours, Kira Osei did something the United States Air Force's satellites could not do. She navigated a commercial aircraft across the Atlantic Ocean using nothing but mathematics and observation. Pure human intelligence against impossible odds. Hour 1 began with the sun. Kira looked out through the cockpit windscreen. The sun was visible. Clear sky. Good visibility. She checked her watch. Analog. Battery powered. Still working. 1422 Universal Time Coordinated. Universal Coordinated Time. She watched the sun's position carefully. Estimated its angle above the horizon using her hand and fingers as a measuring tool. A technique sailors had used for centuries. Approximately 34 degrees above the horizon. She knew the date. February 4th. She knew the time. 1422 Universal Time Coordinated. She calculated in her head. At this date and time, with the sun at this angle, the solar azimuth, the sun's direction, should be 247 degrees true. If they were heading directly toward New York, they should be flying at heading 276 degrees true. Currently, according to the compass, they were at 270 degrees. 6 degrees off. She wrote. Sun angle, 34 degrees above horizon. Time, 1422 Universal Time Coordinated. Solar azimuth, 247 degrees true. Our correct heading should be 276 degrees to stay on Great Circle route to New York. Current heading, 270 degrees. Correction needed, turn 6 degrees right to 276 degrees. She showed it to the pilots. James pulled out a sextant. An ancient navigation tool. It looked like a small telescope with angle measuring equipment. They carried it for emergencies, but James had never actually used one before. He measured the sun's angle. Checked it against navigation tables. Did the calculation. His hand shook slightly as he looked at Kira. She's right. Exactly right. We're 6 degrees off course. Sarah didn't hesitate. She adjusted the heading to 276 degrees. The aircraft turned gently right. Settled on the new heading. Kira made a small check mark in her notebook. First correction successful. 197 more to go. As they flew east to west, chasing the sunset, twilight began. The sky darkened gradually. And stars started appearing. Kira's eyes widened. She loved stars. Had memorized every constellation visible from the northern hemisphere. Knew their positions throughout the year. She wrote. Polaris visible at 51 degrees above horizon. Polaris altitude equals our latitude. We are at 51 degrees north latitude. This is correct for our route. James checked with the sextant again. Measured Polaris, the North Star. Confirmed. We're at 51 north. More stars appeared as darkness fell. Kira identified them instantly. Arcturus. Bright orange star. Visible at azimuth 187 degrees. Vega. Blue-white star. Part of the summer triangle. Deneb. Another bright star in the summer triangle. Altair. The third star of the triangle. She drew a quick star chart in her notebook. Marked their positions relative to the aircraft. Calculated vectors. Angles. Positions. Wrote. Using Vega plus Deneb plus Altair to triangulate position. Based on star positions and time. Estimated position, 47 degrees 12 minutes north, 42 degrees 35 minutes west. Distance to New York, 1,647 nautical miles. Estimated time of arrival, 3 hours 9 minutes at current speed. James used his paper charts. Tried to estimate their position using dead reckoning. Using their last known position and their heading and speed. He came up with 47 degrees 15 minutes north, 42 degrees 40 minutes west. He stared at Kira's numbers. She's within 5 miles of my estimate. And I'm using instruments. She's just looking at stars. Sarah shook her head in wonder. How is this possible? Eidetic memory, James said quietly. She's memorized star charts. She knows exactly where every star should be at every time of year. She's using them like a GPS constellation. But in her head, Kira noticed something wrong. The aircraft was drifting. Despite the correct heading. Despite the corrections. She looked at the ocean surface far below. Watched the wave patterns. The way the waves moved. The wind had changed. She calculated. Original jet stream, 87 knots from 310 degrees. New wind based on wave patterns and drift rate, 110 knots from 295 degrees. Much stronger. Different direction. This would slow them down. Push them off course. She wrote urgently. Headwind increased. Jet stream shifted. New wind, 110 knots from 295 degrees. Ground speed now, 437 knots, not 520. This is serious. Fuel consumption will be higher. Heading correction needed, 281 degrees to compensate for crosswind component. New estimated time of arrival, plus 47 minutes later. Sarah read it. Checked the fuel gauges. Did the math in her head. If we're going 47 minutes longer, and burning fuel at 7,000 kilos per hour. We'll have about 3,000 kilos of reserve fuel when we land, James finished. Instead of 6,000. That's cutting it close. But we'll make it? Sarah asked. Kira nodded firmly. Wrote. Yes. We will make it. Trust the math. Sarah made the heading correction to 281 degrees. The aircraft responded. Straightened on the new course. James was no longer skeptical of this 11-year-old girl. He was in awe. Sarah, she's navigating better than GPS. She's accounting for variables that our flight computers would need constant updates to handle. And she's doing it all in her head. I know. How is this possible? I don't know, James. But we're alive because of her. That's all that matters right now. Meanwhile, 7 miles below them, on the ground. NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, was tracking the solar flare's effects on aviation. Inside Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, dozens of personnel stared at radar screens. Every aircraft over the Atlantic Ocean had gone dark. No transponders. No radio contact. No GPS signals. They were using ground-based radar and satellite thermal imaging to track what they called ghost planes, aircraft flying blind with no communication. Colonel Patricia Ramos stood behind the main display. Watching. Calculating. She was 46 years old. Air Force career officer. 24 years of service. She had seen a lot. But never anything like this. How many aircraft are affected, she asked. An analyst answered, approximately 347 aircraft over the Atlantic at the moment of the solar flare. All of them lost communications simultaneously. Casualties? Too early to tell, ma'am. But without navigation, many of them will run out of fuel before finding airports. We're looking at potential mass casualties. Ramos felt sick. 347 aircraft. Maybe 60,000 people total. What about that one? She pointed to a blip on the screen. British Airways 117. The analyst pulled up the track data. That's interesting, ma'am. Look at its course. It was drifting south for the first hour after the blackout. Normal for an aircraft without GPS guidance. But then. He zoomed in. It corrected. It's now flying a perfect Great Circle route to New York. Precision within 1 mile. Ramos stared. How? They have no GPS. No radio navigation. That kind of precision requires celestial navigation, another analyst said. Dead reckoning. Techniques we haven't used since the 1960s. Who on that aircraft knows 1960s navigation techniques? Ma'am, we have no way of knowing. We can't contact them. Ramos watched the blip on the screen. This one aircraft. Flying perfectly. While hundreds of others drifted randomly. She called over her shoulder. Lieutenant Chen, pull up the passenger manifest for BA-117. I want to know if there are any retired military pilots on board. Former Navy navigators. Anyone with pre-GPS training. Lieutenant Chen typed rapidly. Pulled up the data. Scanning now, ma'am. Passenger list shows, 205 passengers total. Running background checks through our database. 30 seconds passed. Ma'am, no former military on board. No retired pilots. The aircraft has Captain Sarah Whitmore and First Officer James Park. Both trained in the 2000s. GPS-dependent navigation training. Then who the hell is navigating that plane? Ramos muttered. Another analyst, Captain Rodriguez, spoke up from his station. Colonel, I'm tracking their course corrections. They're making adjustments every 30 to 40 minutes. Small heading changes. 2 degrees here. 3 degrees there. It's like they're compensating for wind drift in real time. That's impossible without weather data, Ramos said. I know, ma'am. But look at this. Rodriguez pulled up a comparison chart. I'm overlaying their track with our satellite wind data. Every correction they make matches our wind measurements perfectly. They're somehow calculating wind drift without instruments. Ramos leaned closer to the screen. Are they using visual observation? Wave patterns on the ocean? That's the only explanation I can think of, ma'am. But that requires expertise we haven't taught pilots in decades. You'd need someone who studied pre-1960s maritime navigation. Dead reckoning. Celestial navigation using sextants. A secure phone rang. She picked it up. NORAD Air Defense, Colonel Ramos. Colonel, this is General Marcus Hale, Pentagon. We're monitoring the situation. We need to know who's navigating British Airways 117. It's impossible for modern commercial pilots to fly that precisely without electronics. Sir, we have no communications with the aircraft. The solar flare took out everything. Then when they land, I want a full debrief. If someone on that aircraft can do old-school navigation this accurately, we need them training our pilots. If this solar event happens again, we need people who can navigate without technology. Understood, sir. I'll have personnel on site at JFK when they land. Good. And Colonel? Whatever they're doing up there, it's working. That's the only aircraft in the entire North Atlantic that's on course. Everyone else is lost. Keep monitoring them. If they can make it to New York safely, we need to document every aspect of their navigation method. Yes, sir. Ramos hung up. Kept watching the screen. That one airplane. Flying perfectly through the darkness. Someone on that plane was doing the impossible. And she needed to find out who. While Kira worked in the cockpit, the passengers in the cabin were growing increasingly nervous. The businessman in seat 22B, his name was Robert Chen, kept checking his phone. Dead. His laptop. Dead. Even his watch had stopped working. The elderly woman in 22C, Margaret Walsh, sat quietly with her hands folded. She had lived through World War II as a child. She remembered blackouts. Uncertainty. She knew panic didn't help. A young mother 3 rows back was trying to calm her crying baby. The baby could sense the tension. The fear in the air. Rachel, the flight attendant, moved through the cabin. Calm. Professional. Reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. The pilots are navigating manually. We're on course for New York. Everything is under control. But people weren't stupid. They knew something was very wrong. The screens were dead. The lights were dim, running on emergency battery power. And they had been flying for over 3 hours with no updates. Robert Chen grabbed Rachel's arm as she passed. What's really happening? Don't give me the calm speech. I want the truth. Rachel pulled her arm back gently but firmly. Sir, I've told you the truth. We're experiencing a communications blackout due to solar activity. The pilots are navigating using backup methods. We will reach New York safely. Backup methods? What backup methods? GPS is down. Radio is down. How are they navigating? Rachel hesitated. Then she made a decision. These people deserve some truth. There's a passenger helping the pilots. Someone with expertise in old-style navigation. Manual navigation. The kind pilots used before computers. A passenger? Robert's eyebrows shot up. Who? Some retired pilot? Rachel shook her head. I can't discuss passenger details. But I've seen their work. They know what they're doing. Trust me. She moved on before he could ask more questions. Margaret Walsh watched this exchange. Then she leaned toward Robert. Young man, worrying won't help. That flight attendant has kind eyes. She believes what she's saying. So I choose to believe it too. Robert looked at this elderly woman. Saw the calmness in her face. You're not scared. Of course I'm scared. But fear doesn't change our situation. So I choose hope instead. Robert sat back. Tried to breathe slowly. In the cockpit, Kira had no idea that people were talking about her. Wondering about her. She was focused entirely on the numbers. The calculations. The next heading correction. She wrote. New wind shift detected. Adjust heading to 283 degrees. Sarah made the correction. The aircraft responded smoothly. 198 people flew on through the darkness. Most of them frightened. All of them hoping. All of them being saved by a girl they had never noticed. 3 hours and 47 minutes after the blackout began. Kira wrote. Land visible ahead. Long Island. We are 34 miles south of JFK Airport. Need to turn north 12 degrees and begin descent. Sarah peered ahead through the windscreen. Squinted. Yes. There was land. A faint coastline in the distance. Kira, how do you know that's Long Island and not New Jersey or Connecticut? Kira quickly drew a map. Showed coastal features. Sandy Hook. Rockaway Beach. Jamaica Bay. The shape of the coastline. Wrote. Shape matches Long Island exactly. Distance from our approach angle confirms. Turn to heading 355 degrees and descend to 15,000 feet. Sarah made the turn. Started descending. As they got closer, New York City appeared in the distance. But something was wrong. The city was dark. No lights. No buildings illuminated. Nothing. The solar flare had knocked out the power grid. James's voice was tight with stress. Sarah, we can't land without runway lights. JFK is going to be completely dark. Kira was already writing. JFK runway 31L is 14,572 feet long. Widest commercial runway in New York. Even without lights we can find it using visual landmarks. Jamaica Bay to the south. Van Wyck Expressway to the west. I will guide visual approach using these landmarks. Kira, James said carefully. Visual approaches at night without runway lights are extremely dangerous. We could crash. Kira wrote urgently, her hand moving fast. Moon is 73% full. Rising at 287 degrees azimuth. Will provide enough light to see runway surface. I have calculated exact approach angle. Descent rate. Everything. Trust me. I will not let 198 people die. Sarah and James looked at each other. They had trusted this girl for almost 4 hours. She had been right every single time. Every correction. Every calculation. Perfect. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay, Kira. Guide us in. Kira began writing instructions. Precise. Step by step. Descend to 5,000 feet. Maintain heading 355 degrees. Airspeed 180 knots. Sarah followed exactly. At 5,000 feet, they could see Jamaica Bay below. Dark water reflecting moonlight. Kira wrote. Jamaica Bay visible equals 4 miles from runway. Turn left to heading 310 degrees. This lines up with runway 31L. Sarah turned left. The aircraft banked gently. And there, ahead in the darkness, they could barely see it. A long strip of concrete. Slightly lighter than the surrounding ground. Reflecting the moonlight. Runway 31 left. Kira wrote rapid-fire instructions. Landing gear down. Flaps 30. Airspeed 145 knots. Sarah lowered the landing gear. Set flaps to 30 degrees. Reduced speed. At 2,000 feet. Full flaps. Check gear down and locked. Stabilize descent. At 1,000 feet. Descent rate 700 feet per minute. Airspeed 138 knots. Do not deviate. The runway grew larger in the windscreen. A dark ribbon of concrete in the moonlight. At 500 feet, Sarah could barely see it. No lights. No visual references. Just darkness and moonlight. Kira wrote one final instruction. At 50 feet, flare gently. At 20 feet, reduce power to idle. At 10 feet, hold attitude. Trust the numbers. Trust the math. Sarah's hands were shaking on the controls. 40,000 pounds of thrust. 247 tons of aircraft. 198 lives. All depending on an 11-year-old girl's calculations. 50 feet. Sarah pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose lifted slightly. The flare maneuver. 20 feet. She reduced the throttles to idle. 10 feet. She held the attitude. Kept the nose up. Let the aircraft settle. The main landing gear touched the runway. Perfectly smooth. A gentle kiss of rubber on concrete. The nose gear came down. Sarah deployed the thrust reversers. The brakes. The aircraft rolled straight down the centerline. Slowing. Slowing. Stopping. 4,000 feet of runway remaining. Complete silence in the cockpit. Then James whispered. We're alive. We're actually alive. Sarah sat back in her seat. Her hands were shaking. Tears running down her face. She turned to look at Kira. This tiny girl. Yellow headphones. Purple hoodie. Still not making eye contact. Who had just navigated them across the Atlantic Ocean in complete radio blackout. Using nothing but her brain. Kira, Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. You saved us. You saved all of us. Every single person on this plane. Kira didn't make eye contact. But she wrote in her notebook. My father would be proud. He taught me, accidentally, that math saves lives. I used what he taught me to save people. That makes his death mean something. Sarah couldn't speak. Just nodded. Wiped her eyes. James leaned over and looked at what Kira had written. He had tears in his eyes too. The aircraft door opened. Outside was chaos. But quiet chaos. The airport was dark. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights, battery-powered, surrounded the aircraft. Military personnel. Airport emergency response teams. But no media. No cameras. The city was still blacked out. No one knew yet what had happened in the sky. Colonel Patricia Ramos was there. She had flown by military helicopter from Colorado to New York as soon as British Airways 117 appeared on approach to JFK. She approached Captain Whitmore as Sarah stepped out of the aircraft. Captain Whitmore? Yes. I'm Colonel Ramos, NORAD Air Defense. We've been tracking your aircraft for the past 4 hours. I need to know, who navigated your aircraft? We've been watching you. That was the most precise dead reckoning navigation we've seen since World War II. Sarah stepped aside. Revealed Kira standing behind her. Yellow headphones. Purple hoodie. Clutching her notebook. Not making eye contact. Colonel Ramos stared. The navigator is, a child. An 11-year-old autistic savant with photographic memory, Sarah said quietly. She calculated celestial navigation in her head for 4 hours straight. Without any instruments except her eyes and her brain. Ramos knelt down in front of Kira. Not too close. Respectful of personal space. Young lady, what you did today. Kira held up her hand. The universal sign for stop. Don't come closer. Ramos stopped immediately. Didn't approach. I understand, she said gently. Can you write for me? Kira nodded. What's your name? Kira wrote. Kira Osei. Daughter of Captain Marcus Osei. He died in plane crash 2 years ago. I learned navigation from his books. I just wanted to understand why he died. Now I used what I learned to save people. I think he would like that. Colonel Ramos's eyes filled with tears. She was a military officer. A colonel. She had seen combat. Had made life and death decisions. But this 11-year-old girl had just done something incredible. He would be very, very proud of you, Ramos said softly. You saved 198 lives today. Using skills most people don't even know exist anymore. You're a hero. Kira shook her head. Wrote. Not hero. Just good at math. Math doesn't lie. Math saves lives. My father knew that. Now I know it too. Behind them, passengers were disembarking. Walking down the stairs onto the dark tarmac. Robert Chen, the businessman from Seat 22B, stopped when he saw Kira with the military personnel. He recognized her. The autistic girl who had been sitting next to him. He walked over slowly. Excuse me, he said to Sarah. Was she the one helping navigate? Sarah nodded. She saved all of us. Robert looked at Kira. This small girl he had barely glanced at during boarding. Had dismissed as just another special needs kid. He felt ashamed. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I judged you when I saw you board. I thought you would be a problem. A distraction. I didn't know you would save my life. Kira wrote without looking at him. Most people judge me. I am used to it. But thank you for apologizing. Robert's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. Couldn't speak. Just walked away. Margaret Walsh, the elderly woman from 22C, approached next. She smiled warmly at Kira. I knew you were special, dear. I could see it. Not everyone can, but I could. My grandson is autistic. I recognize the signs. And I know that different doesn't mean less. It often means more. Kira looked up briefly. Made eye contact for just a second. Wrote. Your grandson is lucky to have you. Margaret touched her hand gently to her heart. Thank you, sweetheart. You're extraordinary. Rachel, the flight attendant, was the last to approach. She had tears streaming down her face. Kira, I'm so glad I listened to you. So glad I took you to the cockpit. You saved all of us. Kira wrote. You saved me too. You believed me when no one else would. Thank you for seeing me. Rachel broke down crying. Hugged her clipboard to her chest. First Officer James Park came over to Colonel Ramos. Colonel, you need to see this. He handed her Kira's notebook. Every calculation she made. Every heading correction. All documented. It's extraordinary. Ramos opened the notebook carefully. Looked at page after page of precise mathematical calculations. Star charts. Navigation formulas. All in a child's handwriting. This is a historical document, she said quietly. This needs to be preserved. Studied. This is the most complete record of manual transatlantic navigation we've had in 60 years. Kira reached for the notebook. Protective. Ramos handed it back immediately. Of course. It's yours. But Kira, would you let us make copies? For training purposes. Kira thought about it. Then nodded. Wrote. Yes. But I keep the original. It has my father's techniques in it. It's all I have left of him. You'll keep the original, Ramos promised. Always. 30 minutes after landing, while Kira sat in a quiet room at the airport with Colonel Ramos, the door burst open. Dr. Amara Osei rushed in. She had been in her laboratory at Cambridge when the news reached her. A military call. Her daughter was safe. Her daughter had done something extraordinary. She had caught the first military transport plane to New York. Kira. Kira looked up. Saw her mother. Her face showed no expression, as usual, but inside, she felt relief. Safety. Home. Amara knelt beside her daughter's chair. Didn't hug her, she knew Kira didn't like unexpected physical contact, but held her hands gently. Baby, are you okay? Are you hurt? Kira shook her head. Wrote in her notebook. I'm fine. I navigated the plane. Used Dad's books. Everything I memorized. It worked. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She had spent 2 years watching her daughter obsess over those aviation books. Worried it was unhealthy. Worried Kira was stuck in grief. She had never imagined it would save lives. You saved everyone on that plane, Amara whispered. Do you understand that? 198 people are alive because of you. Kira wrote. I understand the math. 198 people equals 198 families who don't lose someone. Like we lost Dad. Amara broke down crying. Pulled Kira into a gentle hug. This time, Kira didn't pull away. She let her mother hold her. Colonel Ramos stood respectfully to the side. Giving them privacy. But she was documenting everything mentally. This moment. This connection between mother and daughter. After a few minutes, Amara pulled back. Wiped her eyes. They told me what you did. The calculations. The celestial navigation. Kira, that's impossible. How did you learn all that? Kira wrote. Dad's study. His books. I read them all. Memorized them. I wanted to understand why he died. Now I know. And I used what I learned to make sure other people don't die the same way. Amara looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. This small girl who couldn't make eye contact. Who struggled with basic social skills. Who needed help getting dressed some mornings. This same girl had just navigated a commercial aircraft across the Atlantic Ocean using techniques from the 1940s. Your father would be so proud, Amara said softly. So incredibly proud. Kira nodded. Wrote one more thing. I know. I feel him when I do the math. Like he's helping me. Like his love is in the numbers. Colonel Ramos had to turn away. Even hardened military officers have their limits. Captain Sarah Whitmore appeared in the doorway. She looked exhausted. But alive. She smiled when she saw Kira with her mother. Mrs. Osei. I'm Captain Whitmore. I was piloting the aircraft. Amara stood. Shook Sarah's hand. Thank you for trusting my daughter. I know it must have been difficult to trust her. Sarah interrupted gently. Mrs. Osei, trusting your daughter was the easiest decision I made today. She saved all of us. She's a genius. A genuine genius. Amara looked at Kira. She is. She always has been. The world just doesn't always know how to see it. Well, the world is going to see it now, Colonel Ramos said. What Kira did today, it's going to change aviation training. We're going to make sure pilots know how to navigate without technology. Because of her. Kira wrote. Name it after Dad. Please. He deserves to be remembered. We will, Ramos promised. The Osei Navigation Protocol. Your father's name will be in every aviation manual from now on. Kira smiled. A rare, genuine smile. For the first time in 2 years, her father's death felt like it meant something. 3 days later, Kira sat in a quiet office at the FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Her mother was with her. Dr. Amara Osei. Holding Kira's hand. Across the table sat Colonel Ramos. 2 FAA officials. And a representative from the National Transportation Safety Board. They wanted to understand what Kira had done. How she had done it. Kira had her notebook. She was more comfortable with these people than with crowds. Small groups were easier. One of the FAA officials, a woman named Dr. Jennifer Hayes, spoke gently. Kira, we'd like to understand your navigation method. Would you be willing to show us how you calculated the route? Kira nodded. Opened her notebook. For the next 2 hours, she walked them through every calculation. Solar angles. Star positions. Wind drift corrections. Magnetic variation. Great circle routes. Fuel consumption rates. All written in her precise handwriting. All calculated in her head. The officials stared in amazement. Dr. Hayes finally spoke. Her voice was quiet. Kira, this is extraordinary. This is PhD-level navigation mathematics. And you're doing it mentally? Kira wrote. My brain works different. I see patterns. Numbers make sense to me. People don't make sense. But numbers always make sense. Math is safe. Math is predictable. Colonel Ramos leaned forward. Kira, would you be willing to help us? We want to create a training program. Teaching pilots how to do celestial navigation in case this happens again. We need someone who understands it. But we also need someone who can explain it clearly. Kira shook her head firmly. Wrote. Can't teach in person. Too many people. Too much social interaction. Makes me shut down. What if, Dr. Hayes said carefully, what if you didn't have to be there in person? What if you could create written guides? Video tutorials where we only see your hands, not your face. Digital materials that pilots could study on their own. Kira considered this. Wrote. That I could do. I am good at writing instructions. I am good at breaking complex things into simple steps. I could create guides. Then that's what we'll do, Colonel Ramos said. We'll create the OSE navigation protocol. Named after your father. A backup system for pilots to use if all electronics fail. Kira looked up. Made brief eye contact for just a second. Wrote. Named after my father? Yes. Because he taught you, even if he didn't know it. His library. His knowledge. It saved 198 lives. We want to honor that. Kira's hands shook as she wrote. He would like that. Thank you. Kira OSE did not become a pilot. She was still autistic. Still nonverbal most of the time. Still struggled with daily tasks that other kids found easy. She still couldn't tie her shoes without help. Still couldn't make small talk. Still needed her yellow headphones to block out overwhelming sounds. But the FAA created the OSE navigation protocol. A comprehensive training program teaching pilots celestial navigation and dead reckoning techniques. For emergencies. For backup. For when all the technology fails. Kira became a consultant. But not a teacher. Teaching meant too much social interaction. Instead, she created navigation guides written in simple, clear language. Breaking down complex mathematics into steps anyone could follow. Video tutorials that showed only her hands. Demonstrating how to use a sextant. How to read star charts. How to calculate drift. Her voice wasn't in the videos. Just text overlays explaining each step. Mobile apps that taught 1940s navigation techniques to modern pilots. Interactive. Self-paced. Learn at your own speed. She worked from home. Her mother's house in Cambridge. She communicated through email. Through written documents. No phone calls. No video meetings. The FAA paid her as a special consultant. She didn't need the money. Her mother was a successful scientist. But Kira liked having a job. Having a purpose. Once a month, she visited aviation museums. Her favorite was the Royal Air Force Museum in London. They had old navigation equipment. Sextants from World War II. Compasses. Charts. The tools her father's generation had used. She would sit quietly near the displays. Running her fingers over the instruments. Connecting with her father's world. One Saturday afternoon in August, something happened. A young boy approached her. Maybe 8 years old. South Asian features. He wore headphones too. Smaller than hers but the same idea. He carried a notebook. He didn't speak. Just held up his notebook. He had written. Are you the girl who saved the airplane? Kira looked at him. Looked at his notebook. Looked at his headphones. She understood. She nodded. He wrote, I'm autistic too. I want to be like you. Kira smiled. Rare for her. But genuine. She took his notebook. Wrote carefully. You already are like me. Your brain works different. That's not broken. That's not bad. That's special. Find what you love. What your brain is good at. Memorize it. Study it. Master it. Someday, someone will need exactly what your special brain can do. And you'll save them. Just like I did. Being different is your superpower. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The boy read it. His eyes went wide. He hugged his notebook tight against his chest. Then he smiled. A huge smile. His mother came over. She had been watching from a distance. She had tears in her eyes. Thank you, she mouthed to Kira. Kira nodded. The boy and his mother walked away. Kira returned to studying the old navigation tools. The sextants. The compasses. She thought about her father, Captain Marcus Osei. She thought about the 284 people who died on his flight. She thought about the 198 people she saved. She couldn't bring her father back. Couldn't change the past. But she had honored his memory. Had used what he taught her, accidentally, through his books, to save lives. That was enough. 2 years after the solar flare incident, the Osei navigation protocol was taught in every commercial pilot training program worldwide. Over 15,000 pilots learned celestial navigation as a backup skill. 3 separate incidents occurred where aircraft lost GPS and communications. In all 3 cases, pilots used the Osei protocol to navigate safely to emergency landing sites. 47 lives saved. All because an 11-year-old autistic girl memorized her dead father's aviation library. Kira was now 13. Still nonverbal. Still autistic. Still struggled socially. But she had found her place. She continued creating training materials. The FAA called her their invisible expert. The person nobody saw but everyone learned from. She had friends now. Online friends. Other autistic kids who understood her. Who communicated through writing. Who shared her love of mathematics and patterns. She still visited her father's study. Still sat among his books. But now she understood something she hadn't at 9 years old. Her father hadn't just left her books. He had left her a gift. The gift of knowledge. The gift of purpose. The gift of understanding that being different wasn't a curse. It was a superpower. She opened her notebook. The same one she had carried on Flight 117. She wrote. Dear Dad. I saved 198 people using what you taught me. I know you didn't mean to teach me. You just collected books you loved. But I read them. Memorized them. Understood them. Your death taught me that life is fragile. That planes can fall. That people we love can disappear. But your books taught me that math is forever. That knowledge saves lives. That understanding the world makes it less scary. I miss you every day. I wish I could tell you about what happened. I wish I could show you my calculations. But I think you know. Somehow. I think you're proud. I used what you love to save people. That makes your life mean something. That makes your death mean something. Thank you for loving aviation. Thank you for collecting all those old navigation books. Thank you for being my father. I'm different. I know that. My brain works different. But different isn't broken. You taught me that too. Love, Kira. She closed the notebook. Looked out the window at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Polaris. Arcturus. Vega. The same stars that guided her across the Atlantic. The same stars that would guide her through life. Different. Special. Powerful. Just like her.